She saved a millionaire's daughter from being hit by a car, then vanished into the rain before he could ask her name. But when he finds her again, the truth she's hiding threatens not only his reputation, but everything he thought he knew about justice, family, and the past. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, tell us in the comments where are you watching from. If stories about love, sacrifice, and second chances speak to your heart, hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow we're bringing you another powerful story you won't want to miss. The rain came down in sheets, soaking the cracked sidewalks and splattering across flickering street lamps. Ava Calderon pulled her thin jacket tighter around her shoulders as she rushed down the sidewalk, balancing a takeout bag in one hand and her nearly dead phone in the other. It was past 9 a.m., and she still had 9 p.m., and she still had 22 hours, or a local diner. Her soaked sneakers slapped the pavement with every hurried step. Ava's life was a delicate rhythm of exhaustion. 2 jobs, 1 overdue rent notice, and barely enough money to keep her electricity on. But even in her exhaustion, she never ignored those around her. That's why she paused when she saw a small figure dart across the sidewalk ahead, barefoot, drenched, and clearly alone. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old, ran blindly toward the busy street, her sobs barely audible over the pounding rain and whooshing tires. Ava didn't hesitate. She dropped the bag and sprinted. "Hey, wait, stop!" she yelled, her voice straining above the storm. The child didn't hear her. A car horn blared. Headlights surged forward, closing in fast. Ava dove, arms outstretched. The impact never came. She tumbled onto the sidewalk with the girl in her arms, both of them scraped, soaked, and breathless. The car skidded, honked, and kept driving. The little girl clutched Ava tightly, crying uncontrollably. "It's okay, sweetie. You're safe now," Ava whispered, brushing the girl's wet hair from her forehead. "What's your name?" The girl trembled. "Emily." "Emily? Where's your mom or dad? Are you lost?" She nodded, unable to speak. Ava wrapped her jacket around the child and looked up, scanning the area. They were near a residential street of high-end homes and iron gates. This wasn't the kind of place someone like Ava frequented, especially not soaked and shivering like a stray. 5 minutes later, the screech of expensive tires cut through the silence. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb. The passenger door flew open, and a man in a dark suit jumped out, his presence commanding and sharp, like the rain slicing down around them. "Emily," he shouted, rushing toward the girl. The little girl gasped, eyes wide, and let go of Ava just enough to run into the man's arms. "I was scared, Daddy," she sobbed. "I'm here," he murmured, holding her tightly. "I'm here now." Ava stood awkwardly a few feet away, arms crossed over her soaked shirt, her knees stinging from the fall. She was ready to disappear into the night. But the man turned his attention to her. He was tall, striking, and dressed in tailored black. His eyes, gray and piercing, landed on Ava with the weight of someone used to cower. "You saved her." Yeah. She almost ran into traffic," Ava replied, brushing wet hair from her face. His jaw tightened. Then he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a thick stack of bills, folded and crisp. "Please, take this. As a thank you." Ava blinked at the money, then looked down at her bruised palms. Slowly, she shook her head. "That won't be necessary. You just saved my daughter's life." "And I'd do it again," she said gently. "But not for money." She turned away, drenched and shaking, clutching her phone as she started down the sidewalk again, back into the rain. Behind her, Emily turned to her father and whispered something too soft for Ava to hear. But Dominic Vance heard it loud and clear. "I want her to come with us." Dominic's eyes lingered on Ava's retreating form. Something about her voice, her courage, the way she carried herself. Something about her face tugged at something long buried. He stepped back into the car. Emily nestled in his lap and watched as the woman disappeared into the storm. Dominic Vance didn't sleep that night. He sat in his study, the fire crackling behind him, a glass of untouched scotch on the table. Emily had finally fallen asleep upstairs, clutching a stuffed bear and whispering the name, Ova, under her breath, over and over like it meant safety. Dominic stared at the rain streaking down the window, his mind replaying the moment he saw the woman. Ava Calderon. There was something there, something more than just a brave act. Her refusal of money wasn't pride, it was something else. Strength, honesty, familiarity even. Her face stirred something just out of reach, and that unsettled him. He opened his laptop, typed a few commands, and pulled up traffic camera footage from the area. He found the incident, saw the blur of her body throwing itself in front of his daughter, her face soaked but unmistakable, a fire lit in his chest, not just gratitude, curiosity. A quiet pull. Meanwhile, Ava trudged up 3 flights of broken stairs to her apartment, her soaked uniform clinging to her skin. Her roommate had moved out last month without warning, leaving her with the full rent. The heater had broken last week, and the landlord hadn't returned her calls. She peeled off her wet clothes, wrapping herself in a frayed blanket. Her knees throbbed. Her shoulder ached. Her phone buzzed, a text from her manager. "Late again, Ava. One more time and you're out." She bit her lip and deleted it. Despite everything, despite the cold, the exhaustion, the reality that she could have died, she didn't regret saving that little girl. Her arms still remembered the trembling weight of Emily's body. That child had been terrified, alone, and Ava knew what that felt like. She stared at the cracked ceiling for a long time before finally whispering into the dark, "Please be okay, Emily." 2 days later, Dominic Vance sat in the back of his chauffeured car, the city's skyline blurred through the window. He had done his research. Ava Calderon, 26, no criminal record, 1 semester at a local community college before dropping out. Worked 2 jobs, parents deceased, no safety net. No one looking after her. He shouldn't have cared. He was the CEO of Vance Tech, with a reputation for being sharp, ruthless, untouchable. But he hadn't stopped thinking about her, about how she held his daughter, how she turned down his money, how her eyes, dark and steady, looked into his without fear, only concern. "She lives on Ashgrove," he murmured to his driver. Clark turned east. Back in her apartment, Ava was on her way out again, another delivery shift. She didn't see the black car parked across the street, didn't see the man watching from the tinted window as she stepped into the rain again, head bowed, hoodie pulled up. Dominic didn't get out, not yet. But in that moment, watching her disappear into the crowd, something inside him clicked. Not admiration, recognition, a memory, old and fractured, his wife's face, long gone now, a pain he had buried for years. And now this woman, Ava Calderon, with her calm voice and quiet strength, stirred something raw and unfamiliar in him. The next day, he made a decision. He wouldn't offer her money. He'd offer her something else. Something neither of them expected. And everything was about to change. Dominic Vance wasn't used to being ignored. Billionaires didn't have to chase down strangers to say thank you. Normally, a check or a call from his assistant sufficed. But that night's image wouldn't leave him. A woman standing in the rain, soaked to the bone, refusing his money with a calm that shook him more than anger ever could. He replayed the dashcam footage from the car over and over. Emily's little body sprinting into the street, headlights screaming forward, then the blur of a figure diving, shielding her. Ava. It took less than 48 hours for his team to track her down. Not because she had much of a paper trail, quite the opposite. Dominic, head of security, said her file was strangely thin. No college transcripts, no family listed, no social media footprint beyond a blank account. Just a name, Ava Calderon, and 2 low-wage jobs listed at a bakery and a laundromat in East LA. That morning, he arrived at the bakery unannounced. The bell above the door jingled as he stepped inside. The place was small, warm, and smelled like cinnamon and rising dough. A couple of students sat near the window, typing on laptops. A tired mother cradled a crying baby over a muffin. And there she was, behind the counter in a flour-stained apron, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, sleeves rolled. When she looked up and saw him, her eyes didn't widen in awe or fear. Just quiet resignation. You found me, she said softly, wiping her hands on a cloth. Dominico nodded. You didn't leave me much choice. I didn't ask for one, she replied, then turned to grab a tray of croissants from the oven. He waited as she moved, graceful and composed even in the humblest of tasks. When she finally approached him, her posture was polite but distant. I came to thank you, again, he said, properly this time. I told you, I don't want anything. His voice lowered. This isn't just about gratitude. Emily hasn't stopped asking for you. She draws pictures of you. Asks if you're coming to visit. You saved her life, Ava. That matters. At the mention of Emily, something in her expression softened. How is she? Restless. She keeps checking the front door, thinking you might walk through it. Ava hesitated, her lips parted as if to say no, but the image of that little girl, those big brown eyes, held her still. I'll visit, she said at last. Once, just to see her, but no cameras, no press, no favors in return. I want this to be... Dominic raised a brow. You sound like someone used to hiding. She flinched, barely noticeable. I'm just someone who prefers peace. They arranged for the visit the next afternoon. Dominic offered her a car. She declined and said she'd take the bus. At the Vance estate, Emily lit up the moment Ava stepped through the door. The child ran full force into her arms, burying her face into Ava's coat, as if she were a lost puzzle piece sliding back into place. Dominic watched the reunion from a few feet away, unsure what moved him more. The way Ava knelt to meet Emily's height, or how effortlessly the child's anxious energy dissolved in her presence. Later, while Emily played with building blocks nearby, Dominic and Ava sat with mugs of tea in the sunroom. You work too much, he said, noticing the faint tremor in her fingers. She sipped quietly. It's what keeps the lights on. And before the bakery? She glanced out the window. It's not relevant. But to him, it was. Everything about her was relevant now. After Ava left the Vance estate that afternoon, Dominic found himself standing alone in the hallway, one hand resting on the frame of the door she'd just... Emily's laughter still echoed in the background as she played with her nanny, but Dominic wasn't listening. He was watching the closed gate Ava had disappeared behind. There was something haunting about her presence. It wasn't just gratitude anymore, it was something deeper, something familiar. That night, curiosity got the best of him. He opened his laptop and requested a basic background report from his private security firm. But when the file came back, his brow furrowed. Her legal ID only dated back 5 years. Before that, nothing. No driver's license, no tax records, no school files, no relatives listed. It was as if Ava Calderon had appeared out of thin air. He clicked through again, slower this time. The address history jumped from a shelter to a shared apartment, both within low-income neighborhoods. Her resume was hand-typed and minimal. Dominic leaned back, uneasy. People didn't just erase themselves unless they were running from something, or someone. He stopped by the bakery again, not with an entourage, not with an offer, just himself. She was outside, carrying a flour sack to the back kitchen. When she saw him, her expression tightened. Twice in 2 days, she said. Your security detail must be panicking. He smiled faintly. I left them behind. Thought I'd try being human for once. Ava shook her head but led him around back. You said Emily feels calmer around me, she said. Why do you think that is? Dominic paused. Because you don't treat her like porcelain, or like leverage. You treat her like a little girl, not a fragile extension of my empire. She nodded, stirring something in a large metal bowl. Maybe that's why you find me confusing. I'm not impressed by power. I don't want anything from you. He studied her hands, rough with work yet steady. What do you want, Ava? She looked up, startled. To live quietly, pay my rent, maybe sleep more than 4 hours a night. He believed her, but something inside him refused to leave it there. Who were you before? The air thickened, the oven dinged behind her. She didn't move. I was someone who trusted the wrong people, she said finally, and I paid for it. Her voice was calm, but her eyes flickered with the ghosts of things unsaid. Dominic didn't press further, but he did memorize the tone of that sentence, how final it sounded. Later that night, he sat in his office and pulled up her file again. He scanned her job history, her current residence, her emergency contact. None listed. Then he noticed a note from his investigator. No birth certificate found in National Registry under Ava Calderon. Alias status possible. Dominic closed the file slowly, his mind buzzing. Who was this woman who didn't exist before age 21? Who saved his daughter and vanished into a life of flower and silence? And why did his chest tighten every time he remembered the way she gently tucked Emily's hair behind her ear, like it was the most natural thing in the world? He didn't have the answers yet. But one thing was certain. Ava wasn't just a mystery. She was a story he wasn't ready to stop reading. Ava stood outside the towering estate once more, her thrifted navy dress clinging to her in the soft wind. She'd agreed to come for Emily, only Emily. Not for Dominic, not for curiosity, and certainly not for the whispers already crawling through her mind. But as soon as the front doors opened and she stepped into the warmth of the Vance mansion again, she felt the weight of unseen eyes settle on her. Emily ran to her immediately, wrapping small arms around her waist. "You came," the little girl squealed, her face glowing with happiness. Ava knelt to return the hug, her voice quiet but genuine. "Of course I did, sweet pea." Inside, the staff remembered her. They greeted her like an old friend. The chef asked if she'd like her tea, just like before. Ava blinked, wondering how they even knew. Emily dragged her by the hand through the marble hallways, giving her a tour she didn't need, filling the space with innocent laughter. For a moment, Ava let herself smile. Dominic watched from the stairs, arms folded. He was dressed in a dark tailored suit, but his expression was softer than the first time they met. He didn't speak right away, just took in the way his daughter clung to Ava as if she were a lifeline. During dinner, Ava sat beside Emily at the long table. It was a private gathering, just a few extended family members and close friends. Dominic sat at the head of the table, his gaze often drifting toward Ava. He kept her focus on Emily, helping her cut her vegetables and asking about school. The child spoke animatedly, pausing only to lean against Ava now and then, seeking a comfort only she seemed to provide. Across the table, Dominic noticed every glance, every smile. But Ava remained guarded. She answered questions politely, but vaguely. When Dominic tried to engage her, she defected gently, her eyes never lingering on his. It puzzled him. Most people in his world wanted to impress or charm him. Ava seemed determined to disappear, even while sitting in his home. One of the older guests, a woman with silver hair and a sharp gaze, leaned forward as dessert was served. "Forgive me," she said, eyes narrowing. "But you look familiar. Have we met before?" Ava froze. Dominic leaned slightly forward, sensing the shift. Emily, oblivious, reached for another spoonful of chocolate mousse. Ava tucked a lock of hair behind her ear and forced a small smile. "I don't believe so." The woman didn't relent. "You remind me of someone, years ago. A family name, perhaps? Calderon?" The name hit like a slap across Ava's face. Her grip on the spoon faltered, the silver clinking softly against the plate. She stood abruptly. "Excuse me," she said, her voice barely holding together. Emily looked up, startled. "Are you leaving?" "I just need some air." She left the dining room quickly, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Dominic rose, instinctively ready to follow, but paused when he saw her reach the front doors on her own. Ava stepped out into the evening air, drawing a shaky breath as the cold hit her skin. Back at the table, the woman leaned back with a satisfied smirk. "I must have struck a nerve." Dominic didn't reply. His jaw tightened, but his eyes remained on the door where Ava had exited. Later that night, long after the guests had left and Emily was asleep, Dominic sat in his study. The name echoed in his mind, Calderon. Something about it gnawed at him. He pulled up his laptop and began searching. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, only that he needed to understand who Ava really was. Because tonight, her silence had spoken louder than any words. The hours stretched deep into the night. Dominic sat beneath the glow of his desk lamp, its light casting long shadows on the documents and images now cluttering his screen. His fingers hovered above the keyboard as he refined the search. Isabella Calderon, Los Angeles, 5 years ago. At first, nothing useful. Then he clicked on an archived local article with a grainy photograph. There she was, younger, fragile. Her long hair tied back, her eyes wide, almost fearful. The headline read, "Senator Calderon's daughter disappears after family scandal." Dominic leaned in. According to the article, Isabella Calderon was the only child of late Senator Manuel Calderon. Her mother had died when she was 10. The story alluded to financial fraud tied to her father's final campaign and whispers of political enemies seizing the chaos. After the senator's sudden death, some speculated it wasn't natural. Isabella vanished. No official statements, no follow-up. Dominic's heart pounded. Ava was Isabella. She hadn't changed her face, just her name and her silence. He sat back in his chair, the weight of the discovery settling in his chest. Why would she hide a past like that? Why wouldn't she want help? Outside the study window, the mansion grounds were quiet, but in his mind, questions stormed louder than any wind. The next morning, Ava returned to work at the bakery as if nothing had happened. She wore her apron, tied her hair up like always, and focused on icing cupcakes as customers trickled in. But her hands trembled slightly, and her eyes darted toward the door every time the bell rang. She shouldn't have gone to that dinner. She knew at the second that woman had spoken her real name. Ava had spent years burying Isabella Calderon. She thought she'd succeeded until Dominic Vance happened. Her shift ended late. She was sweeping the back steps behind the bakery when a black car pulled up. Her stomach clenched. The door opened and Dominic stepped out. He wasn't in a suit, just jeans, a dark sweater, and that same unreadable expression. "I shouldn't be here," she said before he could speak. "Then why haven't you run?" The question caught her off guard. She lowered the broom slowly. "Because Emily would notice." He nodded once. "You're not just a..." Her breath caught. "You looked me up." "I had to." She turned, hugging her arms. "You don't understand. That life, it broke me. I was 17 when my father died. The press, the lawsuits, the lies. They buried my name, so I left it behind." Dominic's voice was gentle now. "You didn't just leave it. You rebuilt yourself." She looked at him, hurt flickering in her gaze. "No, I survived. That's different." They stood in silence, the only sound the hum of a passing car on the road nearby. Finally, Dominic said, "I don't care who you were, but I care why you still carry it like a scar." Ava blinked, caught between vulnerability and fear, because scars remind you of what happens when you trust the wrong people. Dominic stepped closer. "Then trust me now." She shook her head. "It's not that simple." But even as she said it, a part of her wanted to believe him. He didn't press further, just gave a faint nod, then turned back toward his car. Before getting in, he said, "I'm not trying to expose your past, Ava. I just want to understand the woman who saved my daughter." The door closed, and he drove away. She stood there, heart pounding, the broom forgotten. For the first time in years, someone had seen her, not the name she buried, but the woman she'd become. And that terrified her more than anything. Dominic stood on the terrace outside his home office, the cold wind brushing against his skin, but his mind burned with a single name. Isabella Calderon. The old article still glowed on his tablet. The girl in the photo, barely 20 then, stood beside her father, Senator Rafael Calderon, her eyes wide with pride. It was a different version of the woman he now knew as Ava. But the cheekbones, the mouth, the eyes, they were the same. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Ava stepped hesitantly into view, holding a tray with Emily's forgotten sweater from earlier. She looked tired, cautious, but calm. He met her halfway, holding her gaze. "We need to talk." Yvonne froze, her fingers curling tighter around the tray. "I figured you'd come. I know who you are." There was no use pretending. Her shoulders sagged as she set the tray down. She didn't ask how he knew. Instead, she whispered, "Then I guess you also know why I lied." Dominic nodded, his voice gentler now. Your name. It was Isabella Calderon. Her lips trembled as she sat on the bench beside the rose trellis. Was. That girl doesn't exist anymore. Then tell me what happened to her. He laughed. Ava stared at the stars above them, like they might offer courage. My father was supposed to be the man everyone admired. He fought corruption, made promises he couldn't keep. Until the scandal, the offshore accounts, the bribery, I didn't know anything. But none of that mattered. Dominic listened, the usual sharpness in his expression softened by something unfamiliar. Empathy. She come for us, Ava continued. The press, protesters, death threats. I couldn't walk to class without hearing people whisper that I was part of it, that I helped him, that I smiled while he ruined lives. She laughed bitterly, wiping her cheek. My mother fled to Spain. My brother changed his last name. Me, I disappeared. One suitcase, one bus ride, one name. Ava. Dominic knelt beside her. You were just a girl. You didn't care. To the world, I was a symbol of everything wrong with power. A silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of wind sweeping through the garden. Dominic finally spoke. I remember the headlines. I remember thinking how fast people turned on your family. But I never thought about the daughter they left behind. Ava shook her head. You shouldn't feel sorry for me. I rebuilt my life. I'm not asking for anything. You're right, Dominic said quietly. You're not asking, but that doesn't mean I'm walking away. She looked at him, stunned. Why? Because the woman who risked her life for my daughter isn't someone I'm willing to lose. And because I think I've been blind to more than just who you are. He stood and offered his hand. You told Emily there's always more to a person than what the world sees. Maybe I needed to hear that too. Her fingers hovered near his, trembling. You still don't understand. If anyone finds out who I really am, let them, he said, steady, because the world may have buried Isabella Calderon. But Ava saved my daughter, and she saved me from my own arrogance. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled for the first time in days, a smile that wasn't forced or guarded. For the first time, Ava allowed herself to believe maybe her past didn't have to define her forever. The next morning, Ava stood in front of the mirror in her small apartment. Her reflection looked the same, worn, quiet, but something inside her had shifted. The weight of hiding was still there, but it wasn't as heavy. There was a knock on the door. When she opened it, Emily stood there with a small bouquet of wildflowers clutched in her hand, cheeks pink with cold. Dominic was behind her, his coat unbuttoned, his eyes softer than she'd ever seen. Is that a compliment? Emily said shyly, holding up the flowers. Daddy said you had a sad day. I think flowers help. Ava knelt and took the bouquet, her throat tightening. They do, sweetheart. Thank you. Dominic stepped forward. She insisted on coming, said she wanted to make sure her favorite person smiled today. Ava looked between them. You two should be careful. If people find out you're still around someone like me. Dominic interrupted. Then let them talk. You were brave enough to save my child in the street, Ava. Now let me stand beside you in the light. Later that day, the three of them shared lunch in the back garden of his estate. Something simple. Sandwiches, soup, and warmth that had nothing to do with the food. Emily recounted a story from school, laughing with peanut butter on her chin. Ava gently wiped it away, heart swelling. Dominic watched them both, his expression unreadable for a moment. Then, softly, you don't have to carry this alone anymore. That night, Ava returned to her apartment and pulled out the one box she had never opened in 5 years. Inside were the last pieces of Isabella Calderon, a private school ID card, a journal, a photo of her parents before everything fell apart. She flipped through the journal and stopped at a page dated the night her father's arrest made the news. I don't know what happens to a daughter when the world hates her father. Her hands trembled, but now she had an answer. She became someone else. And yet, she was still herself. The next day, Ava met Dominic outside his office. In her hands was the photo from the journal, now wrinkled but intact. She handed it to him. It's the only family photo I kept, not because I miss them, but because it reminds me who I never want to become. He took it gently, then looked at her. Then let's build something better. In the weeks that followed, Ava returned to the bakery, but the air around her was different, lighter. The other employees noticed. Customers smiled longer. One even asked where she bought her dress. Dominic became a regular, stopping by not just for coffee, but for her smile. One afternoon, as she served a young mother with her toddler, Ava overheard a whisper behind the counter. "That's the woman from the Calderon family, isn't it?" She turned, prepared to defend herself. But Dominic stepped forward. "Yes, that's the woman who saved my daughter's life." The room fell silent. He added calmly, "And if you knew her story, you'd know she saved herself too." Ava stood still as the room slowly returned to normal, but in her heart, something had changed. No more hiding. Not from the whispers, not from the past, not from herself. She was Ava, she was Isabella, she was both. And finally, she belonged. Ava sat behind the bakery's counter, dusting flour off her apron, when a small figure burst through the door. "Miss Ava," Emily's voice rang out like a bell, and before Ava could react, the child flung her arms around her waist. Dominic stepped in behind her, slightly out of breath. "Sorry," she insisted, he said, his voice rougher than usual. "She wouldn't go to school until she saw you." Ava knelt to Emily's level. "Is everything all right, sweet girl?" Emily nodded vigorously and pulled a crumpled piece of paper from her backpack. "I drew this at home," she shyly. Ava unfolded the paper and her breath caught. It was a family drawing. 3 stick figures stood in a row: Dominic, Emily, and her. Her heart squeezed. "That's very beautiful, Emily." The little girl beamed. "Daddy said family means the people who stay. I want you to stay." Dominic looked away, as if the words hit harder than he was ready for. Ava's hands trembled as she folded the drawing, pressing it gently against her chest. "I don't know if I can stay forever," she whispered. "But you always come when I need you," Emily replied softly. Later that week, Dominic returned, holding a neatly printed flyer. "Her school is having a recital," he said, sliding the paper toward Ava. "She's performing a small speaking part. She asked if you could come." Ava hesitated, staring at the cheerful clip art and bold fonts. Her fingers curled around the flyer. I don't usually do crowds," she muttered. "Too many eyes?" "She doesn't care about the crowd," Dominic said. "She just wants you in it." Ava looked up and met his gaze. Something in his eyes steadied her. She nodded once. "I'll be there." When the night of the recital arrived, Ava stood near the back of the school auditorium, her thrifted navy dress slightly wrinkled, her coat damp from the cold. The chatter of parents and children echoed through the hall. She saw Dominic seated in the front row, a single seat beside him empty. She didn't move closer. Not yet. Emily was near the curtain edge, fidgeting. When she spotted Ava at the back, her entire posture changed. She lit up, waved frantically, and mouthed, "You came." Ava smiled and pressed a finger to her lips. "Go on." But the child looked frozen when her class was called. Her face crumpled with nerves as she walked on stage, stiff and silent. From the back, Ava felt the shift in the room. Parents exchanged glances. A teacher whispered at the edge of the stage. And then Ava stepped forward. She stood halfway down the aisle and began to hum. Soft, low, steady. A lullaby, one from a different life. Emily's head turned, her shoulders relaxed. Her voice came out small but clear, and she delivered her few lines like they were made of gold. And a stunned hush followed, then applause, warm, genuine, surprised. Ava blinked fast, her hands shaking. Dominic turned to look back at her. He wasn't clapping, he was just watching. Not like a man in awe of what she'd done, but like a man seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time. After the show, Ava tried to slip out quietly, but a teacher stopped her. "You have a beautiful voice. You should sing more." Ava gave a tight smile. "That's not my world anymore." But it stayed with her, those words, that gaze. That feeling she hadn't known in years. Maybe she didn't have to run this time. The next morning, Ava opened her locker at the bakery to find a folded note tucked inside. Meet me behind the bakery after closing. She hesitated for a long moment, the paper trembling in her fingers. She knew this was coming. Dominic had questions, maybe more than questions, and despite everything in her that screamed to retreat, she stayed. That evening, the wind carried the scent of cinnamon and night frost as she stepped out the back door. Dominic stood waiting by the alley's edge, dressed in his usual tailored coat, but somehow more human than usual. His hands were deep in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "You were incredible last night," he said softly. Ava exhaled slowly. "It wasn't about me." "No, but it was you. That lullaby, you sang it like you've sung it before." Ava nodded. "I used to sing a lot. Music was all I had one." His gaze searched hers. "You trained, didn't you?" She gave a small, sad laugh. "I trained in music, yes. Conservatory, scholarships. My mother said I sang before I spoke." "What happened?" he asked gently. She looked down at her hands, voice hushed. "My father's scandal. It erased everything. My family name was blacklisted, my future disappeared with it. I couldn't get accepted anywhere, I couldn't be seen anywhere. I became a ghost." Dominic stepped closer. "But last night, you weren't a ghost." I don't know how to be anything else," she said. "Disappearing is the only way I've survived." He reached out, not to touch, but just to be near. "You don't have to disappear anymore." She looked at him, pained. "You say that like it's easy. Like I haven't spent years learning how to hide every part of myself. My name, my face, my voice. Every time someone looked too long, I feared they'd recognize me. The girl who fell from grace." Dominic's voice dropped lower. "You didn't fall, Ava. You were pushed." Silence stretched between them, the hum of traffic far off, the soft rustle of leaves. Then Ava asked, "Why are you doing this? You barely know me." He looked away for a beat, then met her eyes again. "Because you saved my daughter. Because you brought light into my home when I thought I was doing fine living in the dark. And because I think I've been hiding too." She stared at him, the tension in her shoulders slowly unwinding. "What are you hiding from?" she asked. "On reflection," he answered. "Years of being the man everyone expects. Strong, cold, strategic. I forgot how to feel anything that wasn't calculated. And now," she whispered. "Now I feel everything," he said. "Because of you." Ava's breath caught. He didn't press closer. He didn't try to take her hand. He just stood there, open, vulnerable, the way powerful men never were. That night, Ava returned home and found Emily's drawing again, creased but still colorful. She ran her fingers over the stick figure version of herself, standing between Dominic and Emily. Her heart ached in the strangest way. Longing, fear, hope. Maybe she couldn't stay forever. Maybe she didn't know how. But maybe, just maybe, she could learn. She placed the drawing on her nightstand and looked out the window at the stars. For the first time in years, she didn't feel completely alone. The morning sun filtered through Ava's small kitchen window, but the warmth it promised never reached her bones. She had just set down a tray of muffins at the bakery when her phone buzzed with a dozen missed calls and messages. Her coworker, Janelle, rushed in, breathless. "Ava, you need to see this?" Ava turned the screen toward her, and there it was, splashed across every news site in bold, screaming letters. "Mystery woman seen leaving billionaire Dominic Vance's estate." And beneath it, a grainy photo of her stepping out the front gate, clutching her coat and looking downward, unaware she was being watched. Her stomach twisted. Her face was blurry, but not blurry enough. The gossip train had no brakes. Within hours, tabloids were filled with theories. Was she a secret mistress? A nanny with ulterior motives? A gold digger? The headlines only grew uglier. At the Vance estate, Dominic was already fielding a storm. His assistant burst into the room with panic in her voice. "Sir, the press is demanding a statement. Some are suggesting she seduced you to get access to your empire. And now," she hesitated, "they've connected her face to an old identity." Dominic's jaw clenched. "Isabella Calderon." He'd suspected the truth was coming, but he hadn't expected it to hit like this. Public, brutal, invasive. The media had dug through school records, archived newspapers, and financial trails. It didn't take long to uncover the story of the fallen Cauldron family, a once powerful name in state politics. Ava Pizzobella had vanished after the scandal that brought her father down. The next headline came like a slap. Disgraced Harris masquerades as heroine. What's her real game? Dominic sat in his office, the pages spread before him, but all he could see was Emily's face when she smiled at Ava. The way Ava had risked her life without knowing who Emily was, the quiet courage, the way she sang at the recital, voice trembling but steady, none of that was a lie. He stood up. Schedule a press conference. Today. His PR team objected. Dominic, if you say anything now, it might escalate. I'm not saying something to save my image, he said, his voice low and sharp. I'm saying it to save hers. Meanwhile, Ava sat on the worn couch of her tiny apartment, knees pulled to her chest, phone silent. She hadn't dared return any calls, not Janelle's, not even Emily's. Her past had finally found her, clawed its way to the surface, and now it was tainting everything she had tried to rebuild. She felt the walls closing in. On the television, the news anchor's voice cut through the silence. We're live at the Vance estate, where CEO Dominic Vance is about to address the recent speculation regarding the woman seen with. Ava grabbed the remote, thumb hovering, but she didn't switch it off. Dominic stepped up to the podium. His eyes scanned the sea of cameras, microphones, and faces hungry for scandal. He took a breath. There's been a lot said about a woman who entered our lives recently. Ava Calderon, or as you now know, Isabella Calderon. Flashes went off. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. She didn't ask for fame. She didn't seek attention. What she did was save my daughter's life. She did it without knowing who Emily was or what family she belonged to. She did it because it was the right thing to do. Ava's hand covered her mouth. She didn't come looking for a place in our lives. We asked her to be in it, and if anyone wants to question her motives, you'll have to come through me first. Dominic's words echoed across every major network. Within hours, they were clipped, shared, and reshared. She is not a scandal. She is the reason my daughter is alive became the quote plastered across social media. In her apartment, Ava sat frozen. The weight of his words, his public defense of her, crashed into her like a wave. No one had ever stood for her like that. Not even her own family, when the Calderon name collapsed under the weight of her father's sin. She stared at the screen until it dimmed, the silence stretching too long. Her heart pounded, not with fear, but confusion, hope, maybe even longing. Then came a knock. She flinched, moved to the door slowly, cautiously, and peeked through the viewer. No one. But as she opened the door, her breath caught. There, resting gently against the frame, was a single envelope. Her name, Ava, was written in crisp, careful handwriting. Inside was a letter. No lawyer's seal, no formal tone, just him. I didn't mean for it to happen this way. You told me once that you didn't know how to stay, but I never stopped hoping you would try. The world knows who you are now, and so do I, and I still want you here. Come home. If you'll still have us. Her fingers trembled as she held the letter close to her chest. She could almost hear his voice in every word, every pause. There was no demand in it, no pressure, just an open door. She stared at it for what felt like forever, the rain now starting to tap against the window, soft and rhythmic like a lullaby. Later that evening, Ava found herself walking, not sure where her feet were taking her, until she stood again outside the Vance estate. Lights glowed softly from the windows. Somewhere inside, Emily was probably still awake, waiting, drawing pictures like she always did. Ava hesitated at the gate. Part of her still believed she didn't belong there, but another part, the stronger part, whispered that maybe, just maybe, she did. The gate opened without a sound. Dominic was already waiting at the front steps. No entourage, no security. Just him. He stepped forward, hands in his coat pockets, eyes searching hers. "Come in. I didn't know if you'd come." he said quietly. Ava looked up at him, rain softly misting around them. Neither did I. Dominic studied her, the woman who had saved his daughter, who had carried so much of her past in silence. You don't owe anyone an apology, Ava, not for surviving. She gave a small, shaky laugh. It's not the surviving that's hard. It's believing I can stop running. He stepped closer. Then don't run. Not anymore. Not from Emily. Not from this. Ava looked toward the house, where warm light spilled through the front windows like an open invitation. Do you think she still wants me here? She asked, her voice barely a whisper. Dominic smiled. She's drawn you in every picture since the night you saved her. Ava's throat tightened. For so long, she had thought her story would end in silence, in shadows. But here, in the rain, she saw a different ending, one she never believed she'd deserve. She took a deep breath and stepped inside. And for the first time in years, the past stopped chasing her. Ava paused on Dominic's entryway, rain-soaked hair clinging to her face. She had stepped back in, this time not as a shadow, not as someone to be hidden, but on her own terms. Dominic closed the door softly behind her. He didn't say a word, just guided her past the entry into the warm light of the foyer. Every step echoed in the quiet of the grand home. Ava's heart hammered, heavy with memories, regrets, and newfound hope. They reached the living room, where Emily sat curled under a blanket, coloring in a picture of a small house and smiling people. The moment Emily looked up, her young face radiated joy. She pressed the drawing, with Ava included, into her hands and leaped forward, wrapping herself around Ava's waist. You came home, Emily whispered, voice thick with relief. You're already my family. Ava sank to her knees, gathering Emily close. For the first time in years, her guarded heart felt something unbreakable. She held her daughter, no, her goddaughter, her soul's daughter, and allowed herself to believe it. Dominic watched quietly, admiration and relief in his eyes. Finally, he spoke. You don't have to hide, he said gently. But you also don't have to depend on us. Avada wiped Emily's hair from her face. I won't, she said, voice steady. I'm here because I want to be, not because I need to be taken care of. Dominic nodded. Then let's set it right. He motioned toward his home office. Inside, he placed a thick folder on the desk. This is a legal team. I've arranged to clear your name, restore your identity. Isabella Calderon. Ava's breath caught. The name she had buried, the name that haunted her nightmares, could breathe again. I don't know if I can face it, she whispered. Dominic came around the desk to stand beside her. You saved my daughter. Now I want a chance to save you. Emily tugged at her sleeve. Can she keep the name, please? Ava swallowed hard. The little voice gave her courage. She looked at Dominic and nodded. I'll do it, she said, voice firm. I'll testify. Dominic's face softened. Next week, the hearing will begin. You'll have me, Emily, and a team to support you. On the morning of the hearing, Ava stood outside the courthouse steps. She dressed in a crisp suit, Isabella's armor. Emily and Dominic reached her side. Dominic squeezed her hand. Inside, the courtroom hummed with tension. Journalists, legal teams, and curious onlookers filled the benches. Ava caught her reflection in a polished table. Isabella Calderon's daughter, no longer hidden. When her turn came, she stood before the judge. Her voice rang clear. She spoke of her family's fall from grace, the scandal, disgrace, their forced exile. She spoke of loss, the pain of erasure, the nights spent plotting escape from her own past. She admitted mistakes born of survival, false documents, hidden addresses, and faint shaskin. She named those responsible in politics and law, detailing the betrayal by her father's former allies. With each word, silent tears wet her cheeks. But she stood firm. She spoke not for vengeance, but for truth. She spoke so others wouldn't suffer under lies. When she finished, the judge paused, a breath of weight, then words that felt like sunrise. By virtue of this testimony, your record will be expunged, your identity restored. You are once again Isabella Calderon. A gasp echoed through the gallery. Dominic and Emily rushed forward. Emily threw her arms around Ava, about his children, breathing heavily. Ava did not hesitate and refused to hold him, as their hearts broke for the first time in months. Later, outside the courthouse steps, cameras flashed, but Ava faced them proudly, head held high. Her declaration was simple, resolute. "I'm Isabella Calderon again." Dominic stepped forward. "And this is my daughter's hero," he said softly. Reporters scribbled and snapped, but drama gave way to dignity. Ava's reclaimed identity was official. But more than that, it signaled a new beginning. That evening, at home, Dominic found Ava in the garden where they'd first reconciled. She held an engraved key, her new house key, presented by the legal team. Dominic said, "You're free, now. Will you stay?" Ava looked at Emily, sleeping softly in a nearby cradle. The wind tugged at her hair. She took Dominic's hand. "I will stay," she said, final and warm. "Here, with my family." He slid his arm around her shoulders. "Welcome home, Isabella." Emily peeked open one eye. "Mama," she whispered, snuggling closer. Vance smiled. "Mama." Dominic pressed a gentle kiss to Ava's forehead. "Now," he said, voice low, "we build together." And, as they stood under the soft glow of garden lights, the Calderon name, once lost, found its place again, through courage, truth, and love. The ballroom shimmered under crystal chandeliers, light scattering like stars across the sea of gowns and suits. The annual Women's Justice Gala buzzed with applause and admiration as stories of resilience echoed from the stage. But when Ava Calderon's name was announced, the room stilled, reverent. She stepped forward in a floor-length ivory dress, simple yet elegant, her hair swept back to reveal her face, no longer hidden, no longer afraid. Cameras clicked, but she didn't flinch. Ava stood tall. "I was once taught that survival meant silence," she began, voice soft but sure. "But tonight, I speak not as someone who ran, but as someone who rose." Her words pierced the crowd, each syllable laced with everything she'd buried for years. The betrayal, the shame, the fear of being seen. She shared how she'd lost her name, her family, and nearly herself. But then, through an act of courage on a rainy night, she'd found something more. Truth, belonging, and a little girl who called her home. As she closed her speech, the crowd erupted. Flashbulbs burst, cheers filled the air. But Ava only searched the room with her eyes, heart racing. Dominic wasn't there. She stepped off stage, hiding her disappointment behind a gracious smile. Until footsteps, heavy, deliberate. The crowd parted. Dominic Vance moved through the sea of people, his black suit still damp from the rain outside. His hair was tousled, his expression unguarded. He walked straight to the stage, then climbed up without hesitation. Gasps rippled across the room. Dominic took her hand, then reached into his jacket. "Ava Calderon," he said into the mic, voice cracking just slightly. "You saved my daughter's life, yes. But more than that, you saved me from my own arrogance, my blindness." He dropped to one knee. "And I don't stand here because I owe you. I kneel because I love you, not as a debt, but as a vow." A box opened. Inside, an understated ring, one single sapphire at the center. "Will you marry me? Not for what you did, but for who you are." A hush blanketed the room. Ava's hands trembled, her breath caught in her throat. Then she nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek. "Eyes," she whispered. Crowd roared. But in that moment, it was just the two of them. The wedding was nothing like the tabloids had expected. There were no celebrity guests, no designer gowns with six-figure price tags, and no magazine exclusives. Instead, beneath a canopy of white roses in the Vance family's private garden, Ava stood barefoot in the soft grass, sunlight catching the lace of her modest dress. Wind danced through the trees like a whisper of freedom, and Emily, in a blushed pink dress, clutched Ava's hand with the joy only a child could carry. Dominic waited at the end of the aisle, wearing a navy suit and an expression so open, so filled with awe, it made Ava's chest ache. The moment came. Emily turned to Ava, eyes wide. "Can I walk you down the aisle?" Ava knelt. "I'd love nothing more." The guests rose. No string quartet, no grand announcement, just quiet, reverent silence as Ava walked forward with the little girl, who had first opened her heart and taught her how to trust again. When she reached Dominic, he looked at her the way no one had in years, not with pity or curiosity or expectation, but with unwavering love. "You look like peace," he whispered. "And you," she murmured back, "look like home." They exchanged simple vows, handwritten and raw. Ava spoke of second chances and the courage to love when it was easier to hide. Dominic promised to stand beside her, not in front or behind, but shoulder to shoulder, whole healing. After the kiss, the reception unfolded in the garden, filled with laughter, homemade food, and music that flowed gently into the twilight. There were no paparazzi, no business deals whispered in corners, just joy, just belonging. Later, as fairy lights flickered above them and guests sipped cider under the stars, Ava sat on a swing beneath the old oak tree. She thought of the girl she used to be. Isabella Calderon, wealthy but invisible. Then Ava Reyes, silent and in hiding. And now, this. Emily padded over in her sparkly shoes and curled up next to her. A long pause. Then Emily looked up, voice barely above a whisper. "Can I call you Mom now?" Ava's breath caught. She blinked back tears as she pulled the little girl close. "I've waited my whole life for that." Behind them, Dominic approached slowly, snapping a photo of the two just as the last golden light dipped behind the hills. Weeks later, that photo hung above the fireplace in their home. In it, three people sat tangled together in the quiet warmth of a summer evening, no longer broken, no longer alone. A nameplate beneath it read, "The Vance family."